Let me tell you how I went from the back row, seated behind the kitchen staff like garbage, to the most talked about guest at a $500,000 Boston society wedding. It took 15 seconds, one powerful ally, and the look of pure terror on my daughter in law's face when she realized she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. My son went pale, his new mother in law actually gasped, and me. I smiled for the first time in 5 years, because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimated. You'll be seated in row 18, near the kitchen entrance, the wedding coordinator said without looking up from her clipboard. My daughter-in-law Amanda smiled coldly from across the room. We can't have your appearance affecting our photos. This is a high society event. My son Derek lowered his head and said nothing. No defense, not a single kind glance. In the glittering ballroom of the Riverside Hotel in Boston, over champagne fountains and crystal chandeliers, I, the groom's mother, was being seated behind the catering staff. I tightened my grip on my purse, feeling my hands shake. 68 years old, widowed for 5 years, 43 years spent raising a son, and all I was worth was a seat near the kitchen doors. I didn't cry. I lifted my chin and walked to that last row as if I were walking through the worst humiliation of my life. And when I sat down in that cold metal folding chair, a distinguished woman in an elegant navy suit placed her hand over mine and whispered, "Let's show them who you really are." I turned, my heart stopping. It was Dr. Helen Castellano, the hospital administrator I'd worked under for 30 years, the woman whose career I'd saved once, who owed me everything. They had no idea that from that moment on, everything was about to change. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave helps this story reach someone who needs it. And if this resonates with you, don't forget to like so we can spread this message further. My name is Patricia Morrison. I'm 68 years old, widowed for 5 years after my husband Frank died of a sudden heart attack. I was a nurse at Boston General Hospital for 43 years, working double shifts to put Derek through private school and then college. I'm not wealthy. I live on my pension and Social Security in a small apartment in Dorchester. After Frank died, I thought I'd made peace with being alone. But today, at my son's wedding to Amanda Whitmore, daughter of one of Boston's most prominent real estate families, I finally understood what real loneliness means. Real loneliness is when your own child looks at you like you're an embarrassment. The ceremony was at the Riverside Grand Hotel, an ostentatious venue overlooking the Charles River. Everything felt designed to intimidate. Tables draped in ivory silk, Dom Perignon flowing freely. Guests in designer labels, their jewelry catching the light like accusations. In my clean but outdated navy dress from JCPenney, I felt like a stain on expensive fabric. When the coordinator pointed me to my seat, I almost couldn't believe it. Row 18, the last row, directly behind the service entrance where waitstaff rushed back and forth with trays. Up front, Amanda's mother, Victoria Whitmore, sat in the first row among a cluster of society women dripping in diamonds. They looked back at me and whispered. One said loud enough for me to hear, "That's the groom's mother." I heard she worked as a nurse. How exhausting that must have been. Another laughed softly, a sound like ice cracking. I heard she couldn't even afford a proper dress. Derek paid for everything today, charity case. I sat down, back straight, hands folded in my lap, willing myself not to shake. Up at the altar, Derek stood in his custom tuxedo, looking like someone I barely recognized. Where was the little boy who used to make me Mother's Day cards from construction paper, the one who said he'd take care of me when I got old? The music swelled. Amanda came down the aisle in a gown that probably cost more than I make in a year. Diamonds at her throat, her train so long it needed 3 attendants. She never looked at me, not once. I was invisible, erased from the picture of her perfect day. Just as I was about to lower my head to hide from the contempt around me, the chair beside me scraped against the floor. A woman sat down, tall, elegant, silver hair styled perfectly. She wore a navy Armani suit and carried herself with the kind of authority that makes rooms go quiet. Dr. Helen Castellano, the hospital administrator, the woman I'd worked under for 3 decades. The woman whose career I'd once saved. She leaned close and whispered, loud enough for the people around us to hear, "Patricia, I'm so glad I found you. I've been looking forward to sitting with you all week." I froze. What was she doing here? Dr. Castellano had retired 3 years ago to some estate in Martha's Vineyard. I hadn't seen her since my retirement party. Why was she at Derek's wedding? She must have seen the confusion in my eyes because she smiled warmly and squeezed my hand. Derek sent me an invitation months ago. He wanted to make sure I was here to honor the woman who made me who I am. You. I felt tears prick my eyes, but before I could respond, I noticed something. People were turning around. The whispers had changed tone, from pity and contempt to curiosity and caution. A woman in a feathered fascinator whispered to her husband, "Who is that with the groom's mother? She looks familiar." The husband squinted, then his eyes widened. That's Dr. Helen Castellano. She was on the board of Massachusetts General, ran the entire hospital system. She's connected to everyone in Boston. Up at the altar, Derek's eyes swept the crowd and landed on us. His face went white as snow. I saw his mouth open slightly, like he wanted to say something but couldn't. Amanda followed his gaze. When she saw me, no longer alone but sitting beside one of the most powerful women in Boston's medical community, her perfect composure cracked. Her smile became forced. Her grip on Derek's hand tightened. Dr. Castellano leaned back, completely at ease, and said casually but clearly, "You know, Patricia, I was just telling the Whitmore family's lawyer last week that you're the most ethical person I've ever worked with. Integrity like yours is rare. If you believe elder abuse and family humiliation should be called out, please stay with this story. Your engagement helps protect others. Thank you." The effect was immediate. Victoria Whitmore, sitting in her place of honor in the front row, turned fully around. Her expression had changed from smug superiority to barely concealed alarm. The society women who'd been whispering about me moments before were now whispering about something else entirely. Why is Helen Castellano sitting with her? Do they know each other? This changes everything. I didn't understand what was happening, but I could feel the power dynamic shifting like tectonic plates beneath the ballroom floor. Dr. Castellano continued, her voice warm but carrying. "I've been meaning to ask you about the documentation you kept from that incident in 2015. You remember the one with the board member's son and the medication diversion. Your meticulous records saved the hospital from a massive lawsuit and saved my career, if I'm being honest." My breath caught. I'd almost forgotten about that. A board member's son had been stealing medications, and I'd documented everything. When he tried to pin it on another nurse, my records proved the truth. The board member had tried to have me fired. Dr. Castellano had stood by me, but only because my evidence was ironclad. She told me later that if I hadn't kept those records, she would have been forced to throw me under the bus to protect the hospital's reputation. "I remember," I said quietly. "You saved a lot of people that day, Patricia, including me." She looked toward the front of the room where the Whitmore family sat. "The lawyer I mentioned, he represents the Whitmore Real Estate Group. They're currently under investigation for some financial irregularities. I've been asked to testify about hospital billing practices related to some properties they own. My testimony could go either way, depending on how cooperative people are." The air in the room seemed to change. I understood now. This wasn't just a kind gesture from a former colleague. This was a power play. Dr. Castellano was sending a message: "Humiliate Patricia Morrison and you'll pay a price." The ceremony proceeded, but I barely heard it. I was too focused on the way Derek kept glancing back at us, his face a mixture of shock and growing horror. On the way Amanda's hand trembled slightly as she held her bouquet. On how Victoria Whitmore's neck had gone red with barely suppressed panic. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the applause was polite but strained. As people began to file out for cocktail hour, Dr. Castellano stood and offered me her arm. "Shall we?" I stood, and together we walked down the aisle. Not skulking in the shadows, not hiding behind the service entrance, but walking right down the center. People parted for us, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Victoria Whitmore stood frozen, clearly wanting to approach but not daring to. In the cocktail lounge, Dr. Castellano stayed at my side, introducing me to people as her dear friend and one of the finest nurses Boston General ever had. Each introduction was a small rebellion against the humiliation I'd been meant to suffer. A prominent surgeon shook my hand warmly. "Any friend of Helen's is someone I should know." A philanthropist asked for my card. "We're looking for board members for a new elder care initiative. Would you be interested?" I didn't have a card. I'd been retired for 5 years, but Dr. Castellano pulled out her phone. "Patricia, give me your email. I'll connect you with Richard. This is exactly the kind of thing you'd be brilliant at." Derek appeared then, Amanda clinging to his arm like a lifeline. His face was pale, his tie slightly askew. "Mom," he said, his voice tight, "can we talk?" Privately, Dr. Castellano smiled pleasantly. "Of course, I'll just go refresh my drink." She walked away, leaving me facing my son and his new wife. Derek opened his mouth, but I spoke first. "Row 18, Derek." Behind the kitchen entrance. My voice was quiet but steady. "You put your mother in row 18. He had the decency to look ashamed. "Mom, Amanda's family insisted on the seating arrangements. There were a lot of important people, and we had 2 important people," I repeated. "So I'm not important. I raised you alone after your father died. I worked double shifts for 20 years to pay for your school, your college, your law degree. And I'm not important enough for a real seat at your wedding." Amanda stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Mrs. Morrison, you need to understand that this wedding cost $500,000. The optics matter. We couldn't have optics." I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. You couldn't have the groom's mother visible because she's not rich enough, because she doesn't fit your aesthetic. Derek reached for my arm. Mom, please don't make a scene. I pulled away. I'm not making a scene, Derek. I'm just finally seeing clearly. You've spent so much time trying to fit into Amanda's world that you forgot where you came from. You forgot me. His face crumpled. I didn't forget you. You just let them put me in row 18. I finished. You just stood there while they treated me like hired help. You just chose them over me. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't think it would hurt you this much. That's the problem, I said softly. You didn't think about me at all. I turned and walked away before he could respond. Dr. Castellano reappeared at my side, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. She gave me one. Well done, she said quietly. Now comes the interesting part. What do you mean? The Whitmores are panicking, she said with a slight smile. They know I hold cards they can't afford to have played. They're going to try to fix this. Sure enough, within 10 minutes, Victoria Whitmore approached, her smile brittle and desperate. Dr. Castellano, what a lovely surprise. I had no idea you were attending. Helen smiled coolly. Patricia invited me. Well, I extended the invitation, but she's the reason I came. Victoria's smile faltered. Patricia, I hope you're enjoying the reception. The seating was interesting, Helen interrupted smoothly. Row 18. Behind the service entrance. Very unusual placement for the groom's mother, wouldn't you say? Victoria paled. There was a misunderstanding with the coordinator. We certainly didn't intend. I think you intended exactly what happened, Helen said, her voice still pleasant but with an edge of steel. You intended to humiliate a woman who spent her entire life serving others, a woman who raised that young man up there alone, a woman who deserves respect. If this story makes you angry, if you believe no parent should be treated this way, please share it. Your engagement helps ensure these stories reach the people who need to hear them. Victoria's composure cracked completely. Dr. Castellano, I assure you, this was never personal. Everything is personal, Victoria. Helen set down her champagne glass. Now I'm going to give you a choice. You can issue a very public, very sincere apology to Patricia right here, in front of all your guests. Or you can let this go and I'll let the investigation into your company's billing practices proceed without my cooperation. Your choice. The blood drained from Victoria's face. You can't, I can, Helen said simply, and I will. Because Patricia Morrison matters. She's mattered to me for 30 years, and she's going to matter to a lot of people from now on. I watched Victoria struggle with her pride, her fear, her desperation. Finally, she turned to me, her voice shaking. Patricia, I owe you an apology. The seating arrangement was cruel and thoughtless. You deserved better, and I failed to ensure you received it. I'm deeply sorry. The words were forced out like pulling teeth, but they were public. People around us had stopped talking, were watching. The humiliation I'd endured was now being acknowledged, and Victoria Whitmore was the one bowing her head. I could have been gracious. I could have said it was fine, that we should move past it. Instead, I said quietly, I accept your apology, but you should know I didn't come here expecting respect from you. I came here for my son. And he failed me too. Victoria nodded stiffly and walked away. Dr. Castellano squeezed my shoulder. You did well. Why are you doing this? I asked, finally voicing the question that had been burning in me. You retired years ago. You don't owe me anything. Helen's expression softened. Patricia, in 2015, you saved my career when you could have destroyed it. That board member wanted your head, and I was under enormous pressure to give it to him. You handed me the evidence that proved your innocence, but you also told me something I've never forgotten. You said, do what's right, even if it costs me my job. That's the only way to live with yourself. I nodded. I remembered. I couldn't do what was right then, Helen admitted. I protected you, but only because you made it easy for me. I've regretted that cowardice ever since. When your son sent me that invitation and I saw your name listed as mother of the groom, I thought it would be a chance to celebrate you. Then I called to RSVP and asked where you'd be sitting. The coordinator told me row 18. I realized something was very wrong, so you came to fix it, I said. I came because you deserved someone in your corner who has power, Helen said. You spent your whole life taking care of other people. Let someone take care of you for once. The reception continued, but I was no longer invisible. People approached me, drawn by Dr. Castellano's presence and endorsement. I met lawyers, doctors, philanthropists. I was offered consulting positions, board seats, speaking engagements. By the time dinner was served, I was no longer the poor nurse hidden in the back row. I was Patricia Morrison, respected healthcare professional and friend to people who mattered. Derek approached again during dinner, this time alone. Amanda was at the head table, looking miserable. Mom, he said quietly, sitting in the empty chair beside me, I need to talk to you. I set down my fork and looked at him. Derek, I don't know if I want to hear what you have to say. Please, he said, his voice cracked. I've been watching you all day, watching people treat you with the respect you deserved from the beginning. I'm ashamed of myself. Good, I said bluntly. You should be. He flinched but continued. I let Amanda's family dictate everything. The venue, the guest list, the seating. They made it clear that their money was paying for most of this, and I felt like I had to go along with whatever they wanted. Even when it meant humiliating your own mother, I asked. Even then, he admitted. I told myself it was just one day, that you'd understand, that it didn't really matter where you sat. But it did matter, Derek, I said. It mattered to me and it should have mattered to you. I know. He rubbed his face with both hands. I've been so focused on impressing Amanda's family, on proving I belong in their world that I forgot about the world I actually came from. I forgot about you. I stayed silent, letting him sit with that realization. Dr. Castellano told me about what you did in 2015, he said, about how you saved her career and could have been fired for it. She said you've spent your whole life doing the right thing, even when it cost you. She said I didn't deserve you. She's right, I said quietly. You don't, not right now. Can I earn it back? He asked, his voice small. I don't know, Derek. I honestly don't know. We sat in silence for a moment. The band was playing, people were dancing, but we existed in a bubble of painful honesty. What do I need to do? He finally asked. First, I said, you need to decide who you want to be. Do you want to be Derek Morrison, the man I raised to value integrity and kindness? Or do you want to be Derek Whitmore Morrison, the society husband who puts optics over everything? Because you can't be both. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I want to be your son again. Then act like it, I said, starting now. Don't wait until the next big event. Don't send me apologetic texts and then disappear for months. Show me with your actions that I matter to you. He nodded. Can you forgive me? Eventually, I said, but Derek, forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. I'll always remember today. I'll always remember that when it mattered, you chose them over me. He stood, his eyes red. I'll prove myself, Mom, I promise. I watched him walk back to the head table, back to his new wife and her family. I didn't know if he meant it. I didn't know if he could change. But I knew one thing. I was done making myself small to make other people comfortable. The reception ended late. As guests filed out, Dr. Castellano offered to drive me home. In her sleek Mercedes, driving through the dark Boston streets, she said, You know, I didn't tell you everything earlier. What do you mean? I asked. The investigation into Whitmore Properties isn't just about billing irregularities, she said. It's about fraud, large-scale fraud. They've been inflating property values, manipulating bids, and pocketing the difference. If it goes to trial, the family could lose everything. I stared at her. Does Derek know? I don't think so, she said, but he will soon. The investigation goes public next week. I was quiet, processing this. So when you told Victoria you could help or hurt them, I was telling the truth, Helen said. My testimony about how they manipulated hospital construction bids could make or break their defense. But here's what I want you to know, Patricia. I'm not doing this as revenge for how they treated you. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. What they did was illegal and it hurt a lot of people, small contractors who lost bids, hospitals that overpaid for construction, taxpayers who funded those projects. I'm just tired of watching wealthy people commit crimes and face no consequences, she continued. And when I saw how they treated you today, it crystallized something for me. People who have no respect for others, who see human beings as disposable, they're the same people who commit these kinds of crimes. The contempt is the same. Will you testify? I asked. Yes, she said firmly. And if Derek wants to stand by his new family through that, that's his choice, but he should know what he's choosing. The next few weeks were surreal. The story of the Whitmore family's fraud broke in the Boston Globe. Dr. Castellano's testimony was damning. The investigation expanded. Victoria and her husband were indicted. Derek called me, his voice shattered. Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I believe you, I said, but you need to decide what you're going to do now. Amanda's family wants me to stand by them publicly, he said, to say the charges are politically motivated, that they're being targeted. And what do you want to do? I asked. I want to tell the truth, he said, but if I do, Amanda will never forgive me. Maybe she won't, I agreed, but you'll be able to forgive yourself. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Will you help me? Will you tell me what to do? No, I said gently. This is your choice, Derek. I can't make it for you. But I'll tell you this. I didn't raise you to value money and status over integrity. If you've lost sight of that, you need to find it again yourself. 3 days later, Derek issued a statement. He said he'd been unaware of his in-laws' business practices, but now that he knew the truth, he couldn't defend them. He said he believed in accountability and justice, even when it was difficult, even when it cost him personally. Amanda filed for divorce 6 weeks later. The marriage had lasted less than 3 months. Derek moved back to his small apartment in Cambridge, the one he'd kept but barely used since the wedding. He called me every week, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to rebuild what we'd lost. If you've stayed with this story, thank you. If you believe in accountability and integrity, please like and subscribe. Your support helps these messages reach people who need them. The Whitmore fraud trial lasted 8 months. Victoria and her husband were convicted. They lost everything, their properties, their reputation, their freedom. They were sentenced to federal prison. Through it all, Derek came to visit me every Sunday. We'd have coffee in my small apartment, and slowly, carefully, we rebuilt our relationship. Not the one we'd had before, where he was the golden child and I was the selfless mother, but something more honest, more equal. One Sunday, about a year after the wedding, Derek brought someone with him. A woman named Claire, a public defender who defended some of the contractors the Whitmores had defrauded. She was smart, kind, and wore Target clothes without apology. Mom, Derek said, I wanted you to meet Claire. We've been seeing each other for a few months. Claire shook my hand firmly. Mrs. Morrison, Derek has told me everything about the wedding, about row 18. I just want you to know, if we ever get married, you're sitting in the front row, center seat. I laughed, genuinely laughed for the first time in months. I like her, I told Derek. She smiled. And if it matters, I grew up in Dorchester too. My mom was a bus driver. I know what it's like to be looked down on for not being rich enough. It matters, I said. As they left, Derek hugged me. A real hug, not the obligatory kind. Thank you for not giving up on me, he whispered. I squeezed him back. I'll never give up on you, Derek, but I also won't let you treat me poorly. Remember that. He nodded. I will. 2 years after the wedding, I sat in the front row at Derek and Claire's ceremony. It was in a small park with folding chairs and wildflowers. Claire's mother sat on one side of me, Dr. Castellano on the other. The ceremony cost maybe $2,000. It was perfect. When Derek said his vows, his voice broke. He promised to honor Claire, to value integrity over appearance, to never forget where he came from. He looked at me when he said it. After the ceremony, at the small reception in a community center, Derek pulled me aside. Mom, there's something I need to say. I'm listening, I said. I'll never forgive myself for row 18, he said. Never. But I want to thank you for showing me that dignity isn't about where you sit. It's about who you are. I smiled. You're learning, he laughed. Better late than never, I agreed. As I watched him dance with Claire, watched him laugh without pretense, without trying to impress anyone, I realized something. The humiliation of row 18 had been terrible, but it had also been necessary. It had forced everything into the light. All the pretense, all the misplaced values, all the ways Derek had lost himself trying to fit into a world that didn't value what mattered. And in the harsh light of that exposure, he'd had to choose. He'd chosen integrity, he'd chosen truth, and slowly he'd chosen me. Not because I was his mother and he was obligated, but because he'd remembered who I was, what I'd taught him, and why those things mattered. Dr. Castellano joined me, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. To dignity, she said, raising her glass. To dignity, I echoed. And to row 18, she laughed. You're really never going to let that go, are you? Never, I said firmly. It's a reminder that where people seat you says more about them than it does about you, and that the only person who can diminish you is yourself. We clinked glasses. Around us, people laughed and danced. Derek swung Claire around, both of them grinning. His friend from law school played guitar. Claire's niece ran around with frosting on her face. It was chaotic and imperfect and real, nothing like the wedding 2 years ago. And that was exactly why it was better, because this time everyone who mattered was seen. Everyone who mattered had a seat at the table. And I, Patricia Morrison, retired nurse from Dorchester, was right where I belonged. In the front row of my son's life. If someone has ever tried to make you invisible, leave a comment saying, I see you, for everyone else here who's been overlooked. Hit subscribe if you believe every person deserves dignity and respect, no exceptions. And share this story with someone who's still sitting in their own row 18, waiting for permission to stand up. You don't need permission. You never did. Thank you for listening. Your engagement changes lives.